Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are diving into a territory where you spend roughly one-third of your entire life. A territory most people, I think, just treat as a simple downtime, blank space between waking moments.
Right.
Tonight, we are tackling sleep, but not through the lens of biology or circadian rhythms. We are looking at sleep as a potential field of, well, advanced spiritual technology.
That's exactly right. For centuries, spiritual traditions have sort of recognized sleep as more than just a physiological necessity. But the sources we have today, drawn from the mother's teachings in integral yoga, they transform that recognition into a rigorous step-by-step
A
science.
science. I like that.
It is. We are setting out to show that the deep, seemingly necessary oblivion of sleep is actually, an active waste of precious time.
We call this the nocturnal frontier because it really is the largest unexplored landscape of our daily existence. So our mission for you, the listener, is to move beyond simply surviving the night.
The biological reset.
Exactly, the biological reset, and begin leveraging it as an active field of sadhana.
And sadhana is the spiritual practice or discipline. It's the means by which you attempt to achieve spiritual realization. And our source material, the mother's chronological records in Mother's Agenda and her questions and answers dialogues, provides the whole methodology for transforming that mechanical rest into conscious repose.
And the foundation for this whole thing, the central idea we have to get our heads around is this. The gap, the unconsciousness you think you fall into, it's not a cessation of existence.
No, not at all. It is purely a failure of the physical instrument, your waking brain,
Yeah.
to record the experiences of your inner being. The movie is playing, you just don't have the tape to record it.
Okay, let's unpack that core teaching because it completely changes our identity, doesn't it?
Mm.
The mother starts with a kind of a metaphysical definition of the human entity.
Right.
We're not a simple single unit.
No, we're a complex aggregate of planes, or she calls them bodies. We have the gross physical body, which we all know.
Sure.
Then there's the vital body, which handles life force, emotions, desires. The mental body, forethought, and then the psychic body, the evolving soul.
So if we're this complex and continuous being, why does the physical part need to just shut down? Why this mandatory recess every night?
Well, the need for sleep is our current evolutionary limitation. It's a limitation of the physical consciousness. The mother explains that the outer surface consciousness, the part of you that's dealing with the five senses and the gross world, is simply, and this is her phrase, incapable of remaining always active without interruption.
So it's like a low-capacity battery.
That's a perfect analogy. It lacks the infinite resilience of the higher planes. It gets stretched and fatigued, and it has to recoil voluntarily to, restore its equilibrium.
So the body forces the surface consciousness to withdraw. And this is where the big misconception, what you call the illusion of cessation, takes hold.
Precisely. Material science, historically, treated sleep as a temporary blackout, a kind of necessary downtime where your neurons are just doing maintenance.
Right, cleaning house.
Exactly. The mother fundamentally overturns this. She states the physical body withdraws, but the inner being, which includes the subtle physical purusha, the vital purusha, and the mental purusha, is liberated.
Okay, hold on. We need to pause on Purusha. That is specialized jargon. What exactly is a Purusha in this context?
That's essential, yeah. The purusha translates roughly to the conscious being, or the soul, or the witness. So if you're composed of these layers, physical, vital, mental, the purusha is the conscious essence that inhabits and uses those layers.
I see.
So the vital purusha is the conscious being behind your emotions and your life force. The mental purusha is the conscious witness behind your thoughts. When the physical self withdraws, these inner conscious beings don't just stop. They are set free to travel, to act, to continue the inner work, often in the very realms associated with their function.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But this brings up the biggest question for the average person, right? If I was having these profound, active experiences, my vital Purusha was fighting dragons, or my mental Purusha was solving some cosmic equation, why is the memory upon waking almost always a total void? Why is that link so fragile?
That is the core technical challenge.
Yeah.
And the mother pins it squarely on the physical brain's capacity. She calls it a failure of memory.
Right.
Think of the physical brain as a specific kind of radio receiver. It's tuned and optimized to pick up local terrestrial signals, the gross material world. But the subtle planes, the vital, the mental, the overmental, they operate at vibrations or frequencies that are just vastly too high or too different for it to process.
So when my inner being comes back carrying this energetic memory of an experience from these other realms, like the pure vibration of strength, let's say, the physical brain looks at that signal,
And it finds it totally outside its processing capacity. It has no file system, no vocabulary to accurately register what that experience was. The energy hits the gross physical consciousness, and because the bridge of memory is undeveloped, the brain just registers a blank.
It's like trying to record a high-definition 8K film on a 1980s cassette recorder.
Perfect. The signal is there, but the machine just registers static. Or a gap, a void.
This map of the nocturnal world is crucial then, especially for the practitioner. You mentioned there's a hierarchy of conscious states in sleep. If we're aiming for conscious sleep, we need to understand the territory we have to climb out of first.
Exactly. The mother delineates four main categories, and at the very bottom, where the vast majority of people are completely stuck, is mechanical or tamasic sleep.
Okay, let's spend a minute on this one because this explains why so many of us feel exhausted after a full 8 hours. What is tamas?
Tamas is one of the three gunas, or qualities of nature. It's the force of inertia, obscurity, heaviness, and resistance. So, mechanical sleep is tamasic because your consciousness has simply collapsed into what she calls the subconscious pit.
The subconscious pit. That sounds unpleasant.
It is. It's the murky, chaotic repository of all our past habits, suppressed emotional residues, and ancestral, animalistic patterns. When you enter sleep tamastically, you spend the whole night wallowing in this mud, which actively contaminates your consciousness.
So you aren't recharging with clean energy, you're actively soaking up inertia. And the effect is grogginess, heaviness, mental obscurity, and just a resistance to getting up and doing anything.
Correct. The quality of rest is zero, or it can even be negative. You wake up more tired than when you went to bed.
Okay, so moving up from that, what's next?
Moving up, we have the state most people identify as active dreaming, the vital or mental excursion.
This is where the subtle body separates and actually travels.
Yes. The vital or mental purusha is active outside the physical shell. And this experience can be extremely varied. You might be involved in exhilarating flights, wonderful things, or you might be embroiled in vital conflicts, subtle struggles with undesirable entities or energies that feed on your fear or your desire.
And that would explain why you can have a really vivid, exciting dream, but wake up feeling completely drained and anxious.
Utterly drained. You likely had a draining vital experience regardless of how it looked on the surface.
And the two highest states.
Next is sushupti, which is deep sleep, but consciously experienced. This is a state of profound rest and silence where the consciousness, having detached from the mental and vital layers, is able to touch the divine origin, what in Sanskrit they call Satchidananda.
Satchidananda. Break that down for us.
It's Satchidananda. Existence, consciousness, bliss. It's the fundamental reality. In Sushupti, there's total immobility, no mental or vital imagery, just this immense peace. The effect is perfect, total regeneration.
And finally, the pinnacle. Conscious sleep or yogic sleep.
This is the continuity of awareness. The body is in a trance-like state of rest, but the inner being is continuously, consciously working, learning, or participating in the inner governance of the universe. There is zero loss of time, zero loss of awareness. This is the ultimate aim of the sadhana of sleep.
So the takeaway for us, for the listeners, is pretty stark. If you wake up unrefreshed, confused, or feeling heavy, you are stuck in that mechanical tamasic state. You're wasting 1/3 of your life in the subconscious mud.
That's the hard truth of it, and it confirms that the entire effort must be geared toward rising above that base level.
Now we move to the next logical step. If the inner self is out there traveling and working, and we only retain these tiny fragments, why are those fragments our dreams, so utterly chaotic and bizarre? This is where the mother's concept of cerebral transcription offers a massive insight.
The problem isn't the experience, it's the translation. That's the key. The mother states that dreams are rarely the direct, unfiltered reality of the subtle worlds.
They're not a live feed.
Not at all. When your liberated, subtle body returns, it brings back an energetic memory, a vibration of knowledge, a sensation of struggle, a quality of light. The physical brain, using its very limited resources, its own memory, sensory data, cultural images, it tries to give that formless vibration a material form. It's a forced translation.
It's like trying to describe the concept of infinity using only like 2 specific objects you found on your bedside table.
That is an excellent analogy, yes. If the inner being experienced a pure, overwhelming influx of power or grace, what we might call an ascension of consciousness, the brain has no sensory input for that. So it translates that powerful upward vector force into an image it does know.
Like climbing a mountain.
Climbing a vertical mountain, riding a fast rocket, or maybe ascending a golden staircase, something it can picture.
And what happens when the brain is particularly noisy, maybe after a stressful day or influenced by what you ate?
Then the translation becomes hopelessly corrupted. The subtle vibration of an important teaching might get stitched together with a memory of a childhood playground and a recent conversation about taxes.
Which results in something absurd, like climbing a ladder made of noodles.
Exactly. The waking mind acts as a chaotic editor, imposing its residual fears, desires, and just random sense data onto the translated fragments.
This proves why those traditional universal dream dictionaries, where a fish always means fertility or a key always means knowledge, are functionally useless in this yoga.
Absolutely useless. The form is mental and completely subjective. The mother warns against intellectual analysis of the image. The crucial insight for the sadhak, the practitioner, is to ignore the specific picture, the snake, the door, the chase, and focus intensely on the vibration or the emotional signature the dream left behind.
But how does a beginner even start to distinguish genuine subtle peace from, say, just simple psychological relief? Or a lower vital conflict from a necessary internal cleansing? This sounds incredibly nuanced.
It is, and it requires meticulous observation. But the quality of the vibration is unmistakable once you train your perception. A true movement from a higher plane, a moment in a prophetic vision, or contact with Sushupti, it will always leave behind a lasting residue of peace, profound strength, or impersonal joy that cannot be faked by the ego.
And the opposite is also true.
Yes. Conversely, if the residue is uneasiness, anxiety, fear, exhaustion, or disgust, that is a marker of the lower vital or subconscious planes, even if the image itself seemed heroic or important.
And you mentioned the subconscious can deliberately mislead by acting as a mirror, by reversing the truth.
It does that often. Because the subconscious is tied to inertia and resistance, it can distort or reverse higher movements. For example, your soul might experience a deep act of purification or surrender, which the subconscious then renders in the dream as a moment of humiliating defeat or being stripped naked in public.
So you have to learn to look past the surface drama?
To the underlying truth of the emotional energy it carries. The strength of your inner witness, the purusha, allows you to see the real action, regardless of the brain's clumsy translation.
Let's use this framework, then, to outline the categories of dream experience by their origin. So we have a reliable classification system for our nightly inventory.
Okay. The most common and perhaps least useful for practice are the subconscious dreams. These are the residue dreams.
The dregs.
The dregs, exactly. They're repetitive, highly illogical, and often directly related to physical factors like indigestion or pressure on a nerve or the room being too hot. They're just the subconscious throwing up old mechanical habits and waste material. If you dream of arguing about the same small problem with the same person night after night, that's subconscious loop material. It's asking to be cleaned out.
Right. Okay, moving up from there. The vital dreams.
These are records of the vital body's excursions into the vast, chaotic, vital world, which is a place of intense struggle and desire. Here you encounter subtle forces, both helpful and hostile.
So you might be running from pursuers or engaging in battles?
Yes, or meeting people who represent your inner desires. The mother calls this the night school because you are learning, often painfully, how to master your fears and desires in a subtle domain. Success there means you wake up invigorated, having overcome some vital challenge. Failure means waking up utterly exhausted.
And then the mental dreams.
These are clearer, less emotional, and often involve receiving or processing knowledge. They happen when the consciousness rises to the mental plane. You might see specific, clear symbols, geometric patterns, or find yourself in a structured learning environment, like a classroom. These dreams often leave you with a feeling of intellectual satisfaction or sudden clarity, like you've solved a problem that eluded you during the day.
And finally, the highest origin, the psychic or prophetic dreams.
These are rare and incredibly valuable. They are often experienced as pure visions rather than what we think of as dreams. They have an intense, lasting clarity, vibrant colors that stay with you, and the impression they leave is one of undeniable truth and deep, stabilizing peace.
And where do they come from?
They originate from the psychic being, the soul, or the subtle physical plane. And they often reveal future events that are currently being prepared on the subtle levels, or offer guiding insight directly from your soul.
So we understand the geography, the planes, and the language, this cerebral transcription. Now, the most critical transition, the practical step-by-step guidance. The mother is adamant that the transition from that mechanical collapse to yogic work requires a rigorous, consistent discipline that starts well before your head hits the pillow.
Absolutely. The state of entry determines the plane one goes to. Phase I. Preparation, the ritual of the night, is completely non-negotiable. If you neglect the physical and mental environment, you're essentially programming your consciousness to sink right into that heavy tamasic plane.
So we have to address both the external conditions and our inner state. Let's start with the physiological and environmental factors. The mother is very specific about dietary regulation.
It's a physical reality with a spiritual consequence. Light food at dinner is mandatory. Digestion requires a massive amount of your vital energy. When you eat a heavy meal, you force that central life energy to stay anchored in the gross material body to support the digestive process.
And that heavy anchor makes it hard for the subtle bodies to get free.
Exactly. It makes a clean withdrawal very difficult, almost guaranteeing that your residual consciousness will sink right into the subconscious pit, which is so often tied to the physical organism.
And timing. The advice is to sleep before midnight. That seems almost quaint in our 2-4-7 world, but there's a specific energetic rationale behind it.
There is. It's linked to cosmic currents. The hours leading up to midnight, as the sun has set and the night deepens, they carry a descending peace. If you enter sleep then, you are swimming with the current, which assists the inward withdrawal of consciousness and helps stabilize the quiet you need for higher travel.
And after midnight.
After midnight, the energy shifts. It begins to rise, preparing for the day. Sleeping through that rising energy requires greater effort and tends to result in rest that is shallower and less fundamentally restorative.
And the immediate environment, the bedroom itself.
It has to be treated as a sacred space. Hygiene and order are paramount. A chaotic, dirty, or noisy space attracts and resonates with chaotic vital entities and disturbances from the subtle, physical, and lower vital planes.
So clean your ring.
Clean your room. The mother suggests creating a calm, orderly, quiet space, she calls it a magic circle, to ensure a protected and supportive environment where the inner work can take place without all that external vital interference. It just reduces the static.
Okay, now for the famous physical discipline, the rag relaxation technique. This is the physical prerequisite for a clean withdrawal of consciousness.
This technique is highly visual and procedural. The instruction is to become like a rag on the bed, limp-a-loose. We have to realize that the tension we carry isn't just muscular, it's cellular. It's in our nervous system and the very tissues of our body. Until this physical body is completely passive, the inner being cannot detach cleanly.
So how do you, the listener, execute this cellular surrender systematically?
You start by assuming a comfortable position. Lying flat on your back, Savasana, is recommended because it's easiest to monitor tension, but true comfort is the priority. The body has to be forgotten.
And
Then you engage your inner will in a progressive release. You focus your consciousness sequentially, maybe starting with your feet and working all the way up to your head. And you must not just wish for relaxation, you have to actively command every muscle fiber, every nerve center to release.
what does that command feel like? Is it a thought?
It's an active transfer of power. You tell your toes you have no will, let go. You move to the calves, the thighs, commanding them to release the day's stress. When you reach the abdominal area, focus on softening the organs, releasing the tension in the solar plexus. The face and eyes are crucial. They're often the last to relax. Command the eyes to sink deep into their sockets, the jaw to unclench, and the forehead to smooth out completely.
And when you've done all that, you reach the rag state.
Yes. The body is completely passive, inert. It feels like a heavy, discarded piece of cloth without its own will, tension, or direction. This physical passivity is the launch pad. If the body is still holding tension, that tension acts as an anchor, dragging the consciousness down toward the lower planes.
With the body neutralized, the next step is clearing the inner instruments. This involves mental clearing, followed by setting the sentinel.
Right. Mental clearing starts with recapitulation. And you have to be careful here. Don't fall into the trap of analyzing, worrying, or planning for tomorrow. Instead, you conduct a brief, dispassionate review of the day's interactions.
You're cleaning the slate.
You're cleaning the slate. You look for moments of ego, friction, anger, impatience. You recognize them as impurities and you consciously offer them up to the divine force for purification. This detachment prevents yesterday's vital and mental gunk from contaminating tonight's practice.
Once the slate is clean, we set the rudder, the samkalpa.
The samkalpa is your conscious resolution or aspiration. It is the very last dynamic thought you hold, and it guides your subtle body's trajectory. You must establish a clear, simple, dynamic will. I go forth to work in the light, or Mother, protect my sleep, or, very specifically, I aspire to meet the Mother in the vital world for guidance.
And that intent acts as a magnetic force.
It does. It directs your inner being toward higher experiences rather than just letting it drift tematically downwards.
And the sentinel, this is the persistent, active part of the will that stays on guard. Explain the mechanics of setting this internal guard.
The sentinel is a fraction of your active waking consciousness that you intentionally detach and station at the entry point of sleep. Its function is crucial. It maintains alertness even as the body and surface mind become passive.
It's a protector.
It's a protector. Its job is to watch. If chaotic, disturbing, or hostile vital vibrations approach your sleeping consciousness, the sentinel is tasked to instantly intervene, invoke the protective light, or, if the threat is too strong, activate the mechanism to gently wake the physical consciousness. It prevents you from sinking entirely into the unconscious. And consistent application of the sentinel reinforces that continuity of awareness we're aiming for.
Let's talk about phase 2, maintenance. Once this preparation is mastered and the consciousness is aligned, sleep is transformed from a passive gap into an active field of conscious work. This changes everything about the night.
The mother repeatedly emphasized the immense work that can be accomplished in this conscious state. This work during sleep falls broadly into 3 categories. The inner being can learn, prepare future actions, and repair inner and outer damage.
Let's elaborate on this school of the night. What kind of learning are we talking about?
It's far more profound than intellectual study. The inner being can receive direct instruction or wisdom from the guru or from higher entities in the subtle worlds. This instruction bypasses the critical, limiting mental structure, allowing truths to be absorbed directly into the deeper consciousness.
I've read accounts of disciples having vivid memories of being taken to subtle classrooms by the mother.
Yes, receiving guidance that fundamentally transformed their perspective when they woke up. It's very real.
And how does the being prepare future actions?
Events that manifest in the material world are very often first prepared and molded on the subtle planes. So the inner being, if conscious, can use this time to align subtle forces, clear obstacles, and ensure that the vital and mental instruments are optimized for future actions, whether that's a major project, a difficult conversation, or a critical point in the sadhana. It's subtle preemptive management.
And the repair function.
This is deep cellular and vital restoration that goes way beyond standard physical rest. The inner being actively clears vital damage accumulated during the day, stresses, conflicts, negative emotional residues. Conscious sleep is not just recharging the battery, it's rebuilding the battery with higher quality materials.
Which brings us back to the apex of the practice, sushupti. Let's contrast the energy source. Why does a few minutes of sushupti replace hours and hours of mechanical sleep?
Because ordinary mechanical rest only restores energy from the physical environment, or worse, it dips into the subconscious pit, which is limited and contaminated by inertia. Sushupti involves the consciousness touching Satchidananda, the source of infinite existence, consciousness, and bliss.
You're plugging into the mains, not just a battery pack.
Exactly. When you recharge from the infinite source, the rest is total. The body absorbs a pure, inexhaustible energy. This is why the quality of rest drastically decreases the need for sleep time. It's the ultimate evolutionary shortcut. It liberates hours for waking life in sadhana.
Now for phase 3, the return, the art of waking. The mother insists this is the most fragile and critical phase. If the gains of the night, the learning, the work, the profound rest are shattered by the act of waking, the whole nightly discipline is compromised.
This is where we impose the cardinal rule: absolute immobility. The mother repeated this instruction constantly to her disciples. She said, "There's one thing altogether indispensable, not to make the least movement when you wake up. You must learn to wake up in a state of complete immobility, otherwise everything disappears."
Why is that immediate physical movement so disastrous to the subtle memory?
We go back to the brain frequency. The moment you move a limb or stretch or open your eyes, you instantly activate the gross motor nerves, the surface sensory apparatus, and the outer practical mind. This creates a massive influx of loud neural noise, the familiar waking frequency, that just instantaneously drowns out the faint, subtle whisper of the memories the inner being has managed to carry back.
The transition has to be seamless.
It must be. You have to train yourself to wake up, eyes closed, muscles completely still, as if you are still asleep. You're allowing those subtle vibrations time to stabilize and seep into the physical brain.
Okay, so once you're immobile, we employ the technique of pulling the thread. Where do we start if all we have is a vague impression?
You start by catching the tail. This is the faint impression, the echo, the feeling, or the single fragmented image that's present in the first millisecond of waking. It might be a color, a geometric shape, or just an overwhelming feeling of peace. That is the tail of the memory thread. You have to grab it.
And the technique for pulling. You said it must be gentle, not forceful.
Absolutely gentle. Any mental strain, any forceful intellectual concentration immediately engages the surface mind and breaks that delicate link. You have to use a passive, almost magnetic will to pull backwards. You trace the thread, go backward from the end of the impression to the middle, and then gently try to reconstruct the beginning of the experience.
The mother suggests tracing the thread across the gap. This sounds like a learned skill, like tuning into a faint radio station.
It is a skill of persistence and quiet attention. You are training the consciousness to bridge the disconnection between the inner and outer states. With persistent, gentle application, you learn to cross that entire gap of apparent unconsciousness and reconstruct the night's journey. Maybe not every detail, but the significant movements, the lessons learned, or the encounters you had.
And if you wake up immobile, with an absolute blank slate, nothing.
Then you stay in quiet concentration. You remain still, eyes closed, and you hold the aspiration that the memory will come. You're inviting the subconscious, which often acts as a gatekeeper for these memories, to surrender its secrets, without allowing your intellectual brain to fabricate or invent anything out of strain. Quiet persistence is the key here.
And one final piece of practical advice regarding modern life. The mechanical shock of the alarm clock.
The mother was unequivocally against the use of mechanical alarms. The violent, abrupt sound forces a sudden, brutal, and unnatural re-entry into the physical body.
I can feel that. It's a jolt.
It is. This not only destroys any chance of retaining subtle memories, but can, she suggested, be potentially harmful to the subtle bodies, forcing them to snap back too quickly from distant planes. The superior solution is an act of pure, conscious will, the final refinement of the sentinel practice.
Training the will to wake the body at a specific time.
Yes. You establish the command before sleep, I will wake up at 5:30 a.m. with full memory, and your trained subconscious executes that command. This allows the inner being to perform a gradual, gentle, and controlled re-entry, preserving the continuity of consciousness and memory.
Let's broaden the scope now as we wrap up. What is the ultimate significance of this practice? The mother's later teachings, especially as she began working directly on the physical matter of the body, discuss the evolutionary horizon this conquest of sleep opens up.
She discusses the eventual obsolescence of unconscious rest. Why is ordinary sleep necessary now? Because the physical consciousness and the very cells of the body are still rooted in the inconscient, the dark, primitive, unconscious bedrock of matter from which the material universe emerged. Ordinary sleep is just a dip back into that black pit to borrow low-grade, contaminated energy for recovery. It's a primitive animal mechanism.
So sleep, in its current form, is a necessary compromise with our material limitations.
Absolutely. But if consciousness continues its evolution, if the higher forces, the light, begin to infuse the material body and transform the cells themselves, then the body is no longer dependent on the mud of the inconscient for its recovery.
This is the shift toward the supramental force and the establishment of the new equilibrium, conscious repose.
Exactly. The body rests, perfectly immobile and passive, but the consciousness is entirely continuous, active, and fully present. It eliminates the tamasic contamination. Ordinary sleep recharges your battery but covers you in the inertia and obscurity of the subconscious. Conscious repose recharges the battery with pure, limitless light and force without those debilitating side effects. The physical necessity for a lapse into oblivion simply falls away.
And this conquest of the little death, the unconscious lapse of sleep, has direct implications for the final transition of life.
This is the ultimate evolutionary horizon. The victory over unconscious sleep is the prerequisite for the conquest of death itself. If the sadhak establishes full, continuous awareness during the hours when the physical body is completely passive and seemingly inert, they have conquered the inertia and obscurity associated with the physical plane.
Wow.
This level of self-awareness ensures that when the final physical transition occurs, the big death, the consciousness remains fully aware, retaining the continuity of self rather than falling into the shock and unconscious dispersion of the elements. It's an act of supreme mastery.
Let's synthesize this one last time for our listeners by just contrasting those two states directly.
Look at it this way. Mechanical sleep is dominated by the force of tamas. It draws its weak, contaminated energy from the inconscient. It leaves you groggy and obscure, and it's characterized by a surrender to unconsciousness.
And the alternative.
Conscious sleep is dominated by sattva, light. It draws its inexhaustible energy from the supramental or divine force. It leaves you clear, energized, and refreshed, and it involves a deliberate, continuous maintenance of awareness and will. It is the choice between wasting one-third of your life and doubling your evolutionary capacity.
It's truly a complete system of inner discipline. The mother's Svapna yoga, the yoga of sleep. To sleep unconsciously is to invite the worst forces of inertia into your being. To sleep consciously is to convert the night into a massive force of acceleration for your spiritual path.
The mother summarized it perfectly when she said, "Sleep is a change of consciousness, allowing the being to enter its inner life, unconsciously at first, consciously as one progresses. The nocturnal frontier is the most challenging, precisely because we have to rely on an inner, non-physical will, but the rewards are absolute mastery over the obscure half of our existence."
So the challenge we leave you with tonight is highly practical. Start with phase on. Implement the RAD technique tonight. Achieve that cellular surrender. And before you drift off, consciously set your sentinel at the gate of sleep. Give your inner being a clear resolution. I will work in the light.
And here is a final provocative thought for you to carry into your evening. If the quality of your conscious rest determines the amount of time you need to recover, and if Mother showed that a few minutes of connection to the source in Sushupti can replace hours of mechanical rest, how much productive, energetic, creative time are you currently sacrificing every single day simply by neglecting the discipline of the night? Your nightly routine is your next great battlefield. Go forth and conquer the dark half.